else. We appreciate Sam taking this interesting topic. I hope you found enough material.
I think so.
And everybody, please check the name off. You want to do yours right now?
Sure.
That's my obligation to Chris Morton. Is it a Monty Python movie? Okay, thanks. Just check and pass it on, and make sure I get it.
And I'm supposed to stay off my foot as much as possible, so I'm going to go watch it in my office. So put my foot up.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, proceed, Sam. We'll see ya.
All right. Okay. So you said I'll be talking about Roman influence in the Alps. I think in some of the previous presentations, I've already talked about some of the kind of historic sites, Roman historic sites in the area. So talk a little bit more about some of those later. But to start out with, I thought maybe just give a quick kind of history overview of Rome in the area. So you have Rome that basically kind of started out just as a regular village in about the 9th century, and eventually, grew to have influence over pretty much all of Italy, but didn't really spread very far outside that for several hundred years. And a lot of that is because of the Alps. That at the time they were really seen as pretty much like an impassable barrier, especially for big armies and things that they would need. So you can see on here, pretty much everything north of Rome at the time was Gaul, which wasn't really like a unified nation as much as just several tribes and things that were living here and up into France, especially. So Rome's influence is pretty much just here in Italy until about the 2nd century BC, and that's because of these guys down here when they ran into Carthage. So Carthage was, I guess, the big superpower at the time, here in North Africa and a lot of Spain and things. And so Rome fought a series of wars here against Carthage. They're called the Punic Wars, if you've heard of them. I think the first one was over Sicily and these islands between the two here in the Mediterranean. And Rome won that war. And so Carthage's response was called the Second Punic War. And that was led by a guy named Hannibal. Might have heard of him. And he, I guess this is kind of where the Alps come into Rome's history a little bit more, because what Hannibal was famous for was leading an army over the Alps to attack Rome. And see, I mean, it's not that far across the Mediterranean from Carthage to Rome, and so all the fighting up till that point had been, between here, and they just assumed that if either one was going to invade the other, they'd come by sea. But you can see Carthage also owned a lot of land here in Spain, so that's where Hannibal was, and he just built up his army here in Spain, and he was the first one to try coming across the top through the Alps to attack Rome. Yes.
He had elephants to that, right?
Yes, he did.
So he had to jump those down in northern Africa, jumping up to Spain, and then across down to Italy.
Yeah.
That was forever.
Yeah.
That's quite a way.
Yep, it is. That's kind of what he's famous.
That's the ancient version of tanks.
Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of what he's famous for, is getting elephants across the Alps. So I'm going to watch a little video on Hannibal and his campaign. Okay, thanks.
It's not springing correctly.
Oh, okay.
become one of the most famous generals in the history of the world. His name was Hannibal, a name that means joy of Baal. Remember the ancient Canaanite god? Hannibal's military strategies and tactics were way ahead of their time. In fact, they're written about and studied to this very day. At the age of 9, Hannibal's father made him swear an oath with the blood of a sacrificed animal that he would never forget that Rome was his enemy for life. This created a hatred for Rome in the young Hannibal that consumed him for the rest of his life. At the age of 26, he assembled his first army, a group of professional soldiers for hire called mercenaries. These warriors became fiercely devoted to their leader, a devotion that would be a valuable asset for Hannibal, as he would soon lead them on a journey that would go down in history as one of the most ambitious military expeditions ever attempted. Before setting off, Hannibal added another asset to his arsenal: war elephants. The sight of these massive war machines struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of the enemy. If you've seen The Lord of the Rings, this is where the idea came from. It was the ancient version of shock and awe. Then, beginning from his outpost in Spain, Hannibal embarked on his warpath to Rome. But instead of the traditional approach by sea, he did the unthinkable. To say that Hannibal took the long way around is an understatement. His plan was to move all 90,000 foot soldiers, 12,000 horsemen, and of course his elephants through Spain, north through France, and east over the treacherous Alps, and invade northern Italy by surprise. One of Hannibal's first great challenges was crossing the Rhone River. Now try getting a cranky and skittish elephant to get on a small raft without panicking. But with his usual brilliance, Hannibal ordered long piers to be built jutting out into the river. He covered the piers with dirt to make the elephant think it was dry ground, with the last part of the pier designed to be cut away as a raft. Not a bad idea, so long as the elephant could be kept calm for the ride. Now, a few elephants did panic and stampede, but Hannibal was able to get every elephant across without losing any of them. The real fun began when Hannibal and his army reached the mountains. The Alps were virtually impassable, with no roads and sometimes not even a narrow footpath. Not exactly the best conditions for an army expedition with thousands of men and animals. They were plagued by hostile encounters from fierce mountain tribes. Then they were hit with severe storms and freezing temperatures, all the while traversing precarious high-altitude passageways, some of which had to be carved right out of the mountain. Not only was weather and altitude a problem, it wasn't long before starvation and sickness began to take their toll, claiming even more lives. But after a grueling 15 days, Hannibal finally reached the other side of the Alps. Historians' accounts of how many of Hannibal's men died while crossing the Alps varies, but the range is staggering. Between 20 to 36,000 men were lost during the perilous journey. That's an average of up to 2,400 men per day. You can see why no one had ever attempted such an exploit before. But Hannibal, despite unthinkable odds, never gave up, accomplishing what most men thought was impossible. He then attacked Italy from the north and achieved an impressive string of victories as he traveled south into Italy. And what about those war elephants? Well, they finally paid off. Elephants, to the attack! They helped Hannibal clean house all over Italy, usually by stampeding and charging the terrified Roman armies. Imagine looking over your shoulder, seeing this. But slowly, Hannibal's elephant supply dwindled, and when he sent for reinforcements back in Carthage, Hannibal's political enemies back home thwarted a plan that would have sent him what he needed to be victorious. With little support from home, Hannibal fought in Italy a total of 16 years, engaging in skirmishes and battles with Roman armies, but never a full-scale attack on Rome itself. Only once did Hannibal march up to the great city, only to reconsider the siege and turn away. He and his army were eventually called back to Carthage, never to return to the land he swore to conquer so many years earlier. Hannibal, despite never losing a battle up to that point, had lost the war, all because he had no reinforcements. Imagine how different world history would have played out had Hannibal succeeded in defeating Rome. Rome's victory in the Punic Wars was a defining moment that set the tone for centuries of worldwide military and political dominance. The power of the Roman Senate, however, was soon replaced by the ultimate authority of one man, the Caesar.
Okay. So, like they were saying, after Rome beat Carthage, that's basically what's kind of set them up for success and to become the superpower that they did in around the Mediterranean. Oh yeah, they're not really sure what exact route Hannibal took through the Alps to get to Rome. There's kind of a lot of debate about it, but there's a monument here in Brahmins to him and his war elephants. So you can see by 44 BC, that Rome had control of all the way up past the Alps into Gaul. That's from Julius Caesar, kind of his thing that he did. But even after Rome had control of land north of the Alps, they still didn't have a whole lot of control actually within the Alps, and it was actually still considered a pretty big threat because there's still places that were remote enough that the tribes that lived there didn't have weren't really very well under Roman control yet, and they needed to be able to get through to defend their new land up there. So Rome didn't really get control of the Alps until Augustus Caesar, who was kind of the first one to run a campaign specifically to take control of the people there in the Alps. So they tried several times. The first couple of their campaigns weren't very successful, but they were eventually able to take over. There were 46 tribes from what I read, 46 different tribes that they had to take over there in the Alps, which if you considering Rome's fighting style and I guess tactics and things, from what I read, that was easier in some ways and harder in some ways than a lot of the other nations that they were up against. A lot of the others who they were up against had really well organized armies, kind of a unified nation that they could come up against and win 2 or 3 really major battles and they'd win the war. Whereas here in the Alps, they were up against several different tribes, each with their own army. So they weren't up against any really big forces, but they had to go to each little village in each place and take each one separately, which kind of explains why it took so long. The army at the time, of course, was the best in the world, the best trained, the best equipped. I'm sure you've all, have seen these their formations and different things that they did that worked great when they were attacking a city or meeting another big army on flat ground, but probably not as great up in the mountains against people who knew the mountains a lot better than them. But they were able to eventually take control of all the Alps. And the Tropium Alpium, this is in France. I don't remember where exactly, but it was built to celebrate Augustus taking control of the Alps. So a lot of the Roman influence that you can see in the area, I tried to look up more about the tribes that they had conquered, and couldn't find a whole lot on them. But probably the place in the Alps that you can see the most Roman influence still is here in Aosta, which we've talked a little bit about already. But this kind of turned into a major outpost for Rome. And I have one more video here, just a little bit about some of the ruins here. So,
So from the number of ancient Roman ruins behind me, you might think that I'm in Rome or some other part of Italy that's really well known for the ancient past. Actually, that's not where I am at all, as you might be able to tell from the snow-capped mountains behind me. These are actually the Alps, and I'm in Aosta, which is a city all the way in the north of Italy, north of Piedmont, practically on the border of Switzerland and France. Aosta is the capital of an autonomous region by the name of the Valley of Aosta. And the reason why you see all this ancient stuff behind me is because it actually dates back to ancient times. It gets its name from Emperor Augustus, who actually founded the city in the 1st century BC. So what you see behind me are the remains of the theater, built in the 1st century AD. This theater held up to 4,000 spectators. And the size of the theater, here in the middle of the mountains, might seem a little strange, but it's because this was actually a very important town in the ancient Roman Empire. And that's because of its location. We're located not only at the base of the Alps, but in ancient times, this would have been right in front of what later became known as the Small and Great St. Bernard Passes, which is one of the major ways to get through the mountains from the Italian boot into northern Europe. This is Mandy with Locks of Italy, and this is Locks of Italy.
okay. So like she talked about there, one of the main reasons that Aosta was so important to Rome in Augustus' time was because of its access to the passes through the Alps. There were two main ones. They had the Greater St. Bernard Pass and the Lesser St. Bernard Pass. This is a picture of it today. You can see it's still pretty sketchy, even with roads and things that we have now. But it was the best way through the Alps for them to get to their territory that they owned up north. So because of that, Aosta was a pretty major outpost for Rome, and that's where you can see most of the ruins and different things that they left behind in that area. So like she talked about, they have the theater there, and also the old walls to the city are still there. And I looked up some pictures and things from it. I guess the city's basically been built up just right around them. You have people who have built their houses up with like the back wall against this old Roman wall, and it's just like that. Let's see, another one that we've talked about before was the salt mine at Salzburg, which was used all the way back then, and even before the Romans were there. So since we've already talked about that, I'll talk more about it. And then here's the last one. This was, well, it's the Arch of Augustus. This is also in Aosta. And this is another one that was built there to celebrate Augustus taking control of that region. And it's still there today. It's been added on to several times from what I read by different groups and things, but you can still see it there. And yeah, that's what I have. Any questions? Any questions or anything?
So when was Aosta built?
I'm not sure exactly. It sounded from what I read like it probably existed, but it was actually made into like a city. Yeah, after Augustus took over, he was the one who kind of made it into a real place. Yeah.
So how big was the army?
So it said, from what I read, it started out with 90,000 people, and they estimated they lost between 20 to 36,000, I think, on the trip over. So he said it was like 2,000 something per day. And they, from what I read, a lot of their problem came from the tribes who were there. There were times where they were passing some of the really sketchy parts of the trail, and they'd be up above them, like rolling rocks down on them and things. So they had people die from falls, from the weather, like they said. So, yeah, pretty crazy that they made it across it all. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, you did.
Well done. I think one more conflict we should have covered is the national sport of the Alps is fighting cows. Not bulls. They have the cows fight each other, and they'll be, you'll see that symbolized here and there. And they have a few times during the year when they have cow fights. So anyway.
Wow.
Well done, though, Sam. So well done. Any other questions, comments?
That's good.
It was good. It was great. So we'll see on Thursday what Colin has to say when he talks about Celtic influence in the Alps.
So we're actually
We're switching.
so I'll be there.
He didn't give me an idea about the switch.
Sorry.
Very good. Bonnie's going to talk about cheese making and what else? Are you going to bring some cheeses from the Alps?
I was wondering, is there like a class budget?
I'm sure we can find the class budget.
I think we should have
I wouldn't complain about having cheese. So.
Sure, up to $25.
There we go.
I can like $25 worth of cheese.
That's the couple.
Okay. We'll see you next time.
Alright.
We are.
Did you grab your flash drive?
Yeah.
I always forget mine,
Yeah,
so.
I haven't worked on it at all.